on the Sunday Footy Show. It's time for TJ's Time Capsule.
It's great to have back the most popular segment on the Sunday Footy Show, and I want to go back to 1994. Now, this week, obviously, there's been a fair bit of debate about what journos can do and what journos can't do. In 1994, it just didn't matter. There were no boundaries. Now, just to set it up, this was preliminary final week. Neil Baum and his Demons went over to Perth to take on the West Coast Eagles, coached by the great Mick Malthouse. Now, fair to say in 1994, Mick was in his grumpy days. He's going to join us in just a tick, right? But it was grumpy Mick in 1994, and he had these things that we hadn't heard of in the football world before, closed training sessions. This is what happened.
When Mick Malthouse declares a training session closed, he means just that. Every gap at Subiaco is covered over, and West Coast staff police it to perfection.
Yeah, but we were getting told nobody.
But someone slipped, and Melbourne's chairman of selectors Greg Wells and football manager Richard Griffiths casually sat in the stands watching the Eagles train. Their cover was blown, however, and the spies were ushered from the ground. Wells was claiming innocence.
Did you know that it was a closed session, Greg?
No, I didn't.
If it was a ploy to rattle Malthouse, it worked. And after venting his anger on the Victorian media,
It's bloody amazing how everything runs clockwork for 2 months until you get the shit from Melbourne.
Malthouse then let it be known he was unimpressed by the Demons' visit.
I mean, if they want to play games and childish games, we live with it.
It was the Eagles themselves playing those games later in the day when Melbourne had a light run at the Wacker.
Well, if they're uncomfortable with people watching them train, well, I guess that's their problem rather than ours.
So after a day which resembled something from a 007 movie, the intense rivalry between these two sides will come to a head tomorrow when they fight for a place in this year's AFL Grand Final. Tony Jones in Perth for Nightline. And the great man now joins us, Mick Malthouse. Good morning.
Good morning, Tony.
Well, you weren't happy back then, were you?
That's all part of the go. The proof's in the pudding. We were able to scrape home the next day, so that's the way it works. Now we a couple of visits to the States and to England. I worked it out pretty quickly that one of the things that they had over there was just these closed sessions mainly just to make sure that you can train comfortably and go through your strategies without anyone looking or listening in. So, that's the way it worked in those days. Now everyone does it, so it's very hard to get in to see anyone's training except for the public day, which, quite frankly, is just a little kick around, a captain's day, and nothing else happens. So the more you can see about a side, the better, really.
Yeah, and then, of course, other clubs adopted it, like Hawthorn. I remember John Hook trying to tell the media at Hawthorn at Glenferrie Oval, you can't exactly have a closed training session at Glenferrie or Arden Street.
Hey, Mick, now that you're out of it, are there any other things that you think, why did I worry about that back then as a coach, which I wouldn't worry about now if I had my time again?
Oh, gosh, his panic's terrific. I try to lock that off. But, the people driving up and down Punt Road, they couldn't care. We've had some fantastic duels with clubs, blokes hiding in trees and all bits and pieces. And in fact, some of my people too have been caught in scoreboards and so forth. So it was all part of the game. I look back now and think it served its purpose. We were pioneers in the whole game when you think about it. We not just West Coast, I'm talking about simply football, going from VFL to AFL. We went national, all sorts of things were happening. Victorian bloke coaching a Western Australian team, vice versa. So I wouldn't change anything. I just think that's just part of history. You look at it now and you think, yeah, well, it's a long time ago. Look at Tony's hair. Look how we've old aged. So those things happen.
Hey, Mick, you went from playing one season to then coaching the next season at the Footscray Bulldogs back then. How hard was that compared to what it would be like now?
I'd be a lot harder now. One of those things, I remember walking into Footscray, I didn't get the job until January, so most clubs had a 3 or 4 or 3 month start. So I walked in there and I'd been, when you look through your career, how many times you've been put on your backside and how many times you may have had a concussion that you didn't really divulge too much about. I walked in and there's Jimmy Edmund, and he put his elbow through my ear one day. And I didn't know what happened for about 2 weeks. So there's my captain. I'm coaching. Tony Bahaj, we got from Essendon. I had a little run-in with him one particular day, and he was very apprehensive about coming to play at Footscray because of that. But you've got to get over that very quickly. And when I look at the likes of Simon Beasley and Andrew Purser and I played against them. not necessarily right on them, but certainly on the same day. And you just got to quickly move into the coaching mode and just sort of lay it down. But I don't know whether coaching. I don't think a player could go and do it right now, because it's the demands of coaching 2020 compared to 1984 are vastly different.
Mick, when it comes to the COVID-19 shutdown, which team and which individuals do you see benefiting most from what now lies ahead for them?
Damien, I think it's going to be the ballistic sides. And I also say the sides that perhaps over a 22 gruelling season, where some of the older players start to wane a little bit. Last year we watched Hawkins play fantastic for 15 weeks and really I thought he struggled from there on in. There's a few other players that looked good early but couldn't sustain it. I think the sides that now, with only 16 games, we've had the one game, so we've got 16 in front of us. Those players it'll benefit them. So it's going to be the bigger, stronger, and the more mature sides that I think will come out the other end. I think there's only 5 or 6 sides can win the premiership this year. And each one of them have got a really good blend of senior players, but they've got that explosive type of player that can play, Dusty Martin, De Goey, Dangerfield, that type of player that can go in and make a habit of winning the ball in the middle, but also causing some damage in the forward line.
When you say 5 or 6 that can win it, Mick, can you refer to some of those? Do you think your old mob, the Magpies, can win it?
Yeah, Collingwood can do it. No doubt. They're a very explosive side. They use the ball well. Their depth is strong, and you'll need depth because we're going to see some injuries. West Coast will certainly feature. Richmond clearly. The toss-up then is who is the next phase, and I think it's maybe Brisbane. They've had a go at it. Greater Western Sydney is my tip to win the premiership, because I think you talk about explosiveness. They've got that, and they've got a bit of they've got the hunger, but they've also got a good age blend. So they're in the mix. Port, not too sure. They tease you a fair bit, Port, but I'm just wondering whether anyone else can really match those. Hawthorn's the other one that may come from a long way back and cause some damage simply because of their age group. And of course, they introduce a new player this year who didn't play last year and is going to be fantastic for them. That's Mitchell.
Mick, David Parkin always referred to the media conferences post-game as the fifth quarter, and your fifth quarters were unpredictable, to say the least. And as reporters, you certainly needed to bring your A game, because you didn't suffer fools, or as we're about to see here, cliches.
Do you think your boys came to play today?
I reckon they probably come here thinking they're going to have a real bad one today in the first quarter. What do you honestly think? That term, come to play, where does it originate from, and what do they reckon? They come to play marbles or football, or do you think they didn't come to play? Do you think they sat in their cars waiting for the game to start, then go out there?
So I think it was Jay Clark who was the journo. Yeah. But Mick, like even in situations, I don't know whether you won or lost, but were you having fun as you were going through that? Were you sort of entertaining yourself?
Probably. I've got to say that now, don't I? I've got to be really honest. You talk about the fifth quarter. I keep saying to the journos, and there's a couple of absolute fantastic ones, particularly Christy. She's probably the best. We all know the daughter. But I get to the game, and the thing I think about all week is matchups and who's going to win, who's going to do this. I never gave the media the end of the game media conference 1 ounce of thought until I was topped on the shoulder, and the media bloke would say, "Oh, by the way, you know you've got this thing." Now, you'd reckon I'd learn after 30 odd years, but I should have been more prepared, put it that way. And I reckon coaches these days, I reckon they must spend a couple of hours on it before they get in there, because they're far more control than I could ever be.
Hey, Mick, we have a segment every Sunday called The Big Ask, where we factor in a player versus another player in their careers. But we're going to take a look at your coaching careers at Collingwood and also the West Coast Eagles and compare where we feel you got the most out of your players. And it's an unbelievable comparison where, obviously you coach similar games, in terms of obviously similar finals. You got to 3 grand finals at West Coast, but 5 at Collingwood, yet you won 2 at the Eagles, you only won 1. But I want to ask you the question, did you get more out of the Collingwood players, despite the fact that you won 1 less premiership? Where do you think you had your most success?
Well, Matthew, that's a really good question. I think a lot of people just assume that West Coast were a great side. When I took them over, we were 11th, and had no Western Australian side had ever won at the MCG in 100 years of footy. So you're only going to win premierships at the MCG unless you do what we did in '91, play it at Waverley. And Collingwood was 16th, so we had a long way. We started a long way back. I think that I'll answer it by saying the most important game that I coached to win was probably 1992 grand final, not because we won it, but because we changed the dynamics of VFL, AFL. So all of a sudden it became a truly national competition, aside from the West had won. Probably the most gruelling and disappointing but proud moment that I coached was 1992. I still think that Brisbane side is the best side I've seen play football. And we were
2002, Mick.
Yes, 2002. And when I look at that game now and I look at the personnel in it, we had put it this way, I think Brisbane might have had 9 All-Australians. We didn't have any that year. But we had a lot of heart. And we had a lot of players that didn't play particularly well in that grand final because they weren't overly comfortable in that arena, nor against that great side. So it fell to a lot of players like Buckley, who won the medal, like Rocker, who I think is the heart and soul of that football club. He was just outstanding. Lucuria, Jimmy Clement, Wakeland, Presti Como, and those sort of blokes. So that's one of my most proud moments to be involved in footy. But West Coast, they're just saying I can't separate how great the playing personnel were as humans.
Yeah.
Football-wise, different, but I just love those West Coast and the Collingwood boys so much because they're just really decent people.